Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Now this video is a little bit different because it's the first video that I'm making where I've actually got some subscribers. I know, it's amazing. I got 2 subscribers. It's taken me all this time to get a subscriber, but I finally got a couple of them. Who knows, by the time I make my next video I might have 2.5 subscribers. So today's video I'm going to be talking about my experiences flying in Kazakhstan, and I can tell you now it's very, 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 very scary. So I recently flew on a domestic flight from Shymkent in Kazakhstan to Aktau, also in Kazakhstan. Quite a long flight, I guess, for a domestic flight. About 2.5 hours, something like that. Now, the flight was taken on Bek Air, as I've mentioned. Before I sort of talk about the flight, let me just tell you a little bit about flying in Kazakhstan. So, it's not really the safest part of the world to be flying in. I don't know, I guess that's a bit debatable. But in terms of the safety records of the airlines here, maybe that's true. I'll explain a little bit why that might be true. Up until recently, the last couple of years, the national carrier here in Kazakhstan, Air was the only airline that was allowed to fly into EU airspace. Now, I'm not saying that's the be-all and end-all, so that means that all the other airlines are terrible just because they're banned from the EU, but some of the kind of incidents do kind of back that up though, because SCAT, an airline that I've flown on, which you can watch that video when I flew, this is my first ever video that I released, when I flew from Shymkent to Astana. They have had a number of incidents. Fortunately, I say fortunately, it's not the right word to say. There's been one plane crash where unfortunately everybody died. But they've had other incidents as well, where the planes have caught fire upon landing, had to make emergency landings. But fortunately all those things were quite a long time ago, and they seem to have put that behind them, and they're definitely an improved airline SCAT, there's no doubt about that. They are allowed to fly in the EU now, as that ban has been lifted on all Kazakh airlines, I believe, not just SCAT. So I've never had a problem on SCAT. I've flown them probably about, I don't know, 6 times, maybe 8 times, and everything's been fine. I've got no issues with SCAT whatsoever. When I first flew on them, back in the day, I say back in the day, it was only a few years ago, but that was when they were, they did have a bad reputation back then. I was nervous flying. I still am. I'm generally a nervous flyer anyway, no matter who I fly with, but particularly when you're flying with an airline that does have a bit of a bad safety record. So if you look up like the 10 most dangerous airlines in the world, like a random YouTube search, SCAT will be on there, I guarantee it. But I guess if they updated that list, it probably wouldn't be on there anymore, at least I hope not. Because I think it got like 1 star in the safety ratings a few years ago. But anyway, moving on to Bek Air. It's an airline that I'd previously never flown with before, until my recent flight to Aktau. And I know someone who had flown on them, and they said something's a bit unusual with them. When you fly with Bek Air, the emergency exit seats, you don't get any extra leg room. Normally there's like extra leg room, I guess, so it creates extra space for when, if God forbid there is an incident, you have to go out the emergency doors. There's more space, presumably, but not on Bek Air. There's not. There's no extra space at all. I don't know whether that's something that is the case with all Fokker 100 planes, or whether it's just Bek Air with their kind of seating arrangement. So yeah, I flew on Bek Air from Shymkent to Aktau. I believe this was back in March, the beginning of March. And as far as I was aware, there'd only been one incident, well, certainly a serious incident with Bek Air. And that was a few years ago, a plane landing in Astana. Not sure where it had come from, can't remember. Might have been Kizloda, but I'm not sure. When it was coming down to land, the wheels at the front of the plane didn't open. It was a technical error. So the plane had to come down just with its back wheels and like sort of nosedive onto the runway. The crew at Astana Airport done a good job. They put a lot of foam on the runway, and fortunately the plane landed safely. I mean, it was an emergency landing, of course, but it managed to land, I think, without any serious injuries. I guess people were in shock, but there were certainly no fatalities. But yeah, I mean, that's not acceptable, is it? It's a technical error on the plane. Checks probably haven't been done properly. That just should not be happening. But I mean, that was an isolated incident a few years ago. So I put that to one side and thought, okay, I'm going to fly with Bek Air. That doesn't bother me. And just getting onto the plane, I knew it was an old plane, a Fokker 100. Never flown on a Fokker before. And I don't know, it was a bit kind of eerie. It was like getting onto a museum, you know, a moving museum. And maybe it was because of the type of plane it was. It just seemed to be noisier than other planes. We took off all rightish, I guess. Let me just say as well, this journey I'm talking about, this flight I'm talking about, I did not video this. I videoed my return flight, which you'll be able to see on my channel. But I want to talk about this flight first, as it's more kind of important. We took off. I guess it was okay, but after we sort of got up into the sky, it was very, very bumpy, more bumpy than what it would usually be. I experienced a lot of turbulence, and I mean, Bek Air's reputation didn't do me any favours, if you see what I mean. I was already nervous before we'd even taken off, whereas if I flew like on a different airline, a well-respected airline, I wouldn't have been nearly as nervous. So that kind of went against them. So it wasn't, how can I say, it wasn't really their fault that I was so nervous. And again, I guess it was their fault for being a bad airline. I think you know what I mean. And there were parts of the flight, it was okay, it was quite calm. But I can tell you now, the last part of the flight, I've never been so scared in my whole life. I didn't know what was going on. We were sort of, for start, it was pitch black. It was a night flight, and we were shaking all over the place as we were making our descent towards Aktau. I didn't know where we were. We were shaking about. It was rough. It was doing my, playing around my ears. It was like that, and you could really feel the force of the plane. Like we were going really fast. For all I knew, we were sort of heading down. I really didn't know what was happening, and what made it worse was that everyone else on the plane was in the same situation as me. I was hoping like I'd just be nice, just me, just being nervous, but you could see everybody was really, really worried because we were all everyone was looking around, looking out the window, everything okay? People were really panicking within themselves, not aloud. that would have created more chaos, I think, because there was no, how can I say, it wasn't that I thought something was going wrong, it was more a case of I didn't know if things were going right, if that makes sense. In the end, everything was absolutely fine. We landed safely, and I can't tell you the relief on the plane. Everybody was clapping like mad, and there was people shouting, saying, "Oh, you know." It was a relief. It was a huge, huge, huge relief. It's difficult to say. I'm 99% sure that everything was absolutely fine on that flight, that the pilots didn't have any issues. It was just a lot of turbulence, just a rough flight, a very, very, very bad flight, probably the worst flight I've ever been on. Like I say, it doesn't help that it was on an airline that I didn't exactly trust. Should I be flying on an airline that I didn't trust? Probably not, but okay, I did. But look, we landed safely. It was a major relief. Got to my hotel. I did a little search, and I found out that I think about half a month earlier, so like in mid-February I believe it was, there was an incident on a Bek Air plane, and also a Fokker 100, because they only have Fokker 100s in their fleet, from doing a similar route to ours, from Almaty in the west of the east of Kazakhstan, flying to Aktau, the west of Kazakhstan, because we were flying from Shymkent, also in the east, to Aktau in the west. So a similar route, but with different origins and destinations. That plane had a problem, a serious problem, at the beginning of its journey. There was some technical problem, and they had to make an emergency landing in Taraz, which is probably around 500 kilometers from Almaty. So, like I say, I only found out about that after I arrived in Aktau, which is a good thing. If I'd found out about that before my flight, if I'd bothered checking, I would have been in even more of a nervous wreck. So fortunately, I didn't check, the latest news about Bek Air before flying on that flight to Aktau. I'm just glad I didn't check that before. But now it made things worse, because I was flying back 2 days later on Bek Air back to Shymkent. This was the flight that I filmed, as you can check on my channel not right now, after you've watched this video. And like I said, I was more nervous than I even was flying out, because I knew that there's just recently been an incident with them. The only kind of thing that I had in my favour, or that was making me a bit more confident, was that the flight wasn't as late. It was kind of early evening, so it was still light when we were taking off at least. It just reassures me a bit when it's light outside. I don't know, it's like when you drive a car, I feel safer when I drive in the day rather than at night, because at night you can't see as well. Okay, there's less cars on the road, but especially if there's no street lighting, like here in Kazakhstan, it's a lot more difficult to see. Or you can get like headlights blaring onto you. I'm not saying that's the same with a plane, but even so, I just feel more reassured when I fly during the day. You can see outside the window, you can see where you are. Presumably the pilot has a better view, could see better. But I don't know if that does make any difference, if it's day or night when you're flying. But anyway, flew back. That flight wasn't as nerve-wracking, because there was less turbulence. There was still a bit of turbulence. I was pretty nervous when we were coming down to land. Again, not that really anything had gone wrong on the flight, or wasn't that, like I say, it wasn't that much turbulence, so it wasn't nearly as bad. It was, but even so, Bek Air, my God, you put me through gave me a ride there, I tell you. that was an experience and a half flying on Bek Air. That's not the end of it though. When I got home, I checked the latest news for Bek Air. And would you believe it? I think it was that day that I checked, just after arriving back home, or the following day, there'd been reported a story of another Bek Air flight having an emergency landing. For some reason, it got reported about a week after the incident occurred. So this new incident I'm telling you about happened a few days before I flew on my original flight from Shymkent to Aktau, the one that I was really nervous on. But it didn't get reported until after I'd flown to Aktau and come back. What happened was there was a flight, again, Fokker 100, as I've said, is the only airline in their fleet, took off from Aktau, which is where I also took off from on my return journey. It was making a short trip to Aktau, 2 cities in the west of Kazakhstan, and whilst taking off from Aktau, there was a problem, and from what I can make out, it looked like, from what I've read, it almost like the plane was coming down, so it was going up and then starting to go down, and there was a major situation. The plane ended up going round and landing back in Aktau, where it had just come from, where it had just taken off from. You know, with all the stuff above it, the oxygen mask had fallen and it had come out, and that was just while taking off. There was some technical issue with them. So there you have it. Just before I flew on Bek Air those 2 times, there and back to Aktau, there had previously been 2 major incidents on Bek Air that required emergency landings. Fortunately, everything was okay. They did land safely, thanks to the expertise of the pilots. It's not the pilots I have a problem with on Bek Air. It's the maintenance of the planes. It's just not good enough. That should not be happening at all. I mean, touch wood, there have never been any fatalities on Bek Air. Although I found out they haven't actually been going that long. I think they were formed in 2011, something like that, 2012, 2010, something around that period. So they're not exactly a well-established airline. Yeah, scary, scary, scary stuff. I can tell you that now. Especially now, knowing that there were those 2 flights before me that had experienced emergency landings. Now, like I say, I do believe that that outbound flight was never in danger. It was just a rough ride, rough journey. And coming back was fine as well. Would I fly Bek Air again? Probably be surprised by my answer. I'm going to say yes, probably would. Why? Because if I'm flying somewhere and they've got the cheapest flights, I'm probably going to take them up on that, even though I don't trust them. It's probably not a good idea. If you don't trust an airline, probably shouldn't fly on them, especially when it comes to safety. But look, I don't fly very often anyway, so we'll cross that bridge. I'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I don't have any more flights booked on Bek Air anytime soon, and I probably won't have the opportunity, or the kind of the I don't know. Probably won't fly them again this year, but you never know. Maybe I will. So yeah, that's flying in Kazakhstan. If you want to play it safe, or safe as can be, better off flying on Air Astana. They're the most well established and best air carrier in Kazakhstan, but with that comes higher prices. You're nearly always going to pay higher fares on Air Astana than on Skat or Bek Air, probably Kazakh Air as well. Let me just mention Kazakh Air. It's a small airline that only do domestic flights, which is the same as Bek Air. They only do domestic flights. All their planes are brand new. I've got no issue with Kazakh Air whatsoever. I don't class them as a dangerous airline. The two dodgy airlines for me are Bek Air and Skat, although like I've said, Skat has vastly improved. And I may take that off my kind of dodgy list sometime soon. But Kazakh Air, yeah, I've got no issues with them. So yeah, that concludes my video for today. The next video is going to be in Russian. This is going to be the same type of video, talking about my experience on flying in Kazakhstan, particularly my experiences on Bek Air. Fly with Bek Air at your peril is my final words to you. Goodbye.